the Barclays Center, the Atlantic Yards project, did not go through the city council. It was a state project.
Right. But let me just say, it didn't have to, but it could have.
And had it, how would you have changed it?
And let me just say, and it could, and partially the way it could have is, if you remember, there was a small proposal for a stadium on the west side of Manhattan, which many had go down in the history books as one of the worst ideas ever. And I was proud of all of us, and I want to thank folks in this neighborhood who worked with us on the west side of Manhattan in beating that back. The neighborhood opposition facilitated in part that proposal having to go through ULURP, even though it didn't have to because it was state land. And the Times Square redevelopment wasn't the exact same structure we have now. It was before the charter change. That also went through a full review. So one of the things I would say as mayor moving forward is I would always take the position that land, even if it isn't required to, when there's large developments, you know, not one building here or there, but large developments on public land would have to go through ULURP, because then you can really have a full community conversation with the community board, with their resolutions at the table, and then you can really have different types of projects develop where you might have ended up with a different proposal that might not have had so many folks in opposition. I can't tell you exactly where it would have ended up, because I think the project would have looked different had it gone through ULURP, and I wish it had, because we would have had a real neighborhood debate.
So what would you have liked to have seen in it that it wasn't? If it had gone through city council, what do you think would be different about this project?
I think you would have seen, well, a lot of the affordable housing and other components that have yet to become realized. I think you would have potentially seen the phase-in differently, that those would have been phased in earlier, and a requirement of a certain level of development around the affordable housing almost to trigger the stadium part of it. I think you would have had clear structures of more community input around the development and around some of the congestion and traffic pieces. I believe we would have had a more robust traffic study and more input for real community input and design around how to deal with the traffic.
How do you think that's worked out so far?
You know, so far from what I understand, a lot of the worst fears haven't come to fruition, but I also think it's too early for anyone pro or con to draw a conclusion yet. We haven't kind of even been through a full season, so to speak.
Barclays Center, has it been a good thing for Brooklyn?
It's been a good thing for Brooklyn, but it's not why that development at Atlantic Yards was worth it. That will only be true when the affordable housing is built, and it's something I'm committed to following through. Just a quick and simple answer. I thought that, and I think saying that Atlantic Yards was controversial is a great understatement of our time.
You think?
Yeah, I think just a little. But what I felt is, in a rapidly gentrifying neighborhood, the possibility of creating a really extraordinary amount of affordable housing and an extraordinary number of jobs, union-scale jobs for folks in surrounding neighborhoods, many of which were disadvantaged, that was the worthy goal. Government, I don't think, has done a real good job of following through on that goal, and I think the next mayor has to do that very aggressively.
Was the deal structured in a way that developers could be held accountable?
The community benefits agreement was stronger both in terms of the amount asked of the developer, proportionate to other similar agreements around the city. It was one of the strongest we've ever seen. I think it would have been much stronger had there been a direct government participation in the guarantee process. I think that was a structural flaw. But I think it's now the role of government to step in and do it.
So what can government do?
I think the fact is that the current developer can, and like every other developer, which they endlessly want other opportunities from government, other permissions, if you will, other approvals on a host of projects. I think there can be a very noble and appropriate linkage that says if you want to continue to do business, you have to keep your previous commitments. If you can't keep your previous commitments, let's find someone else who can.
Now, when the building is built out, that census tract, as you know, will be the densest in the nation. Is there the appropriate infrastructure there to support that?
Look, I think the original environmental impact statement was lacking. I didn't like that process. I mean, I think there's a lot of things along the way that could have been done better. But I think we can catch up on the infrastructure because, let's face it, the build-out will be 10 to 15 years minimum.
what can be done? And if you were mayor, what would you do to ensure that there would be the appropriate sewage and the right number of schools and even transit?
Well, the transit options, obviously the underground transit options are exceptional. And that's one of the great strengths of the site, one of the great transit sites in the whole country, in fact. I think the bigger issues are around, sewer and water and other types of infrastructure. And again, I think if we objectively look at the needs and we find we have to do some build-outs, there's time to do it. There's a worthy public investment considering the amount of housing that will be created in a city that we all know is pushing on towards 9 million people. But I'm most concerned about the affordable housing. Look, I think that the central challenge right now in the city is that we have an affordability crisis and we have an income disparity crisis. And I think I can say safely, particularly folks in this room, all the organizations represented here, and your commitment to a diverse, inclusive New York City, we don't want to see New York City be unavailable for the rich mix of people that have been its historic reality. We're going to keep up. We're going to have a city that's really economically diverse. We have to constantly build more affordable housing. And I put out a plan recently that I think can do that at a much bigger level. But this project has to be fully realized because we simply need the housing, and particularly the high percentage of affordability. We have to put the investment in infrastructure to catch up with that need. That's the